Greetings, Guardians, to another episode of Tired Plays Destiny, where today it is currently 2300 on a Sunday night. What am I doing with my life? Oh, right, Beyond Light Talk, which is what I named this episode and then promptly forgot. Yeah. Well, let's just get this over with and start talking lore shit. Because I need to get that off my head right quick. Where did I put Google Docs? I keep forgetting where I sort things. Well, hold on. Actually, I'm just going to pull it up here if I can get to it without my drive going fucking nuts. Then, this one. Right, this one goes first, and then that one. Alright. I'm just going to read this, and then occasionally I'm going to pop over to here and take some notes. I got this off of Tumblr, which is why there's the credits up here, and then there's the raid secrets thing right there. All right. Personal log, encrypt, P key, Clovis, root, QD resist, SHOR, RNG seed, AM241, echo, Hanu, quartz. A new start, a clean page for a most important story. Hanu 2 is arrow breaking over Jupiter. Yeah, fuck, I've already fucked up. Hanu 2 is arrow breaking around Jupiter. The Lord of Planets thunders his greeting to me. As I record this, I am blasting Avianti 3's Siegfried in the Stormwall over the radio howl of the Jovian magnetosphere. It galvanizes me. I am with the gods. Ask Avianti's trainers how they settled on the 1, 2, 3 suffixes. Numbers are perfectly defined, therefore inhuman. Is this a suffix meant to mark the Avianti AI as non-human? Objective. Construct a long-term scientific outpost for study of indigenous European life. Resources. 8 prefab starter habitats, 600 shielded heavy work frames, Invisnu and BRA-MA cytomachines with backup replication chambers above Hanu. The best hazardous equipment engineers money can't buy, Smile support for extended duration, 2 of Elizabeth's Eon-type platforms for radar, LiDAR, and deep ice mapping. Hazards. Lethal radiation environment. Heavy ion bombardment from Jovian magnetosphere. Unshielded crew half-life is 24 hours. The most expensive lie in human history. I am not here for a safari. All of Europa's life will soon be known, mapped, and exhausted of wonder. Bound by the tedious constraints of physics and biology. I know these things too well. They are already killing me. The K1 artifact promised me an offering. A gateway to the secret of immortality. I call it clarity. It is waiting on Europa. I am still dying, but not fast enough to kill me. Sorry, had to breathe. Body at 35.9 degrees Celsius. Pulse, 25 beats per minute. Strength good. Blood pressure, 75/50. Respiratory, 6 breaths a minute. Pulse ox, 210%. Today's blood mix is perfluorocarbon with stem slurry. Avoid hyperfocus with alpha wave brainwash for 10 minutes an hour. New kidneys are growing in Whitford the Deli Pig for next transplants. Must find a good pork recipe so Whitford will not go to waste. Medical team insists I accept cytomachine injections. No! Nothing enters my body that does not share my genetic self-interest. Instead, I will grow an upgraded monocyte strain. Elizabeth's birthday approaches. A good gift would be an olive branch. Never let her say I do not try. Honey, please identify a gift that could come from my own intimate, impersonal knowledge of my granddaughter. Gift suggestions. Antique weapon, or Twin Eagle replica. Professional pilot trained on Eon series ship. Bespoke AI writer of personalized novels. Fruit basket, Titan farmed. Humanitarian investment. Minefield clearance. Long-term reparations. Anti-traumatic medicine. These are pathetic, Hanu. Provide gift suggestions. Research endowment, medical. Prion disease in persons with immune resistance to recombinant gene therapy. Research endowment, medical. Sporadic, fatal insomnia. Research endowment, psychological. Loss of father and family trauma. Research endowment, psychological. Reconstruction of trust after loss. Oh God. Personal apology, unpracticed. Death of patient in physician's care. Statement of grief, unpracticed. Death of son. Oh God. Never mind, Hanu. Buy a few dog hives or soil reclamation projects somewhere. Honeybees, whatever strain is best. In big, friendly Newfoundlands for the hives. Everyone loves dog hives. Ongoing projects. The Examind. Locked. Contact the Ishtar Collective on Venus for their trick. Failed. Hire Dwayne McKnight away from the Ishtar Collective on Venus. Failed. Raid the Ishtar Collective on Venus for Dex data. In planning. Europa/Clarity. In progress. Be a good man and a good grandfather. In progress. Become Luca of future human thought. In progress. Note. Barotrauma. If we land too hard on Europa, we will plunge into the ocean below the ice and die of barotrauma. Death by pressure. The only light down there comes from magma and phosphorescent bait. The sea is 10 times deeper than Earth's. Even in Europa's weak gravity, peak pressure at the seafloor is 2,000 atmospheres. Worse than Venus before the Traveler. One imagines pi contracting under that kind of pressure, crushing the perfect circle closed. I wonder what lives down there. What slow confusions of mass and form curl around the smoking vents? What threads of pale flesh slither across dark miles, like nerves in some vast, cold brain? Did the Traveler bypass Europa, and Titan, and Enceladus, out of respect for native life? Was it afraid to touch the things pulsating below the ice? 240 atmospheres, force of hydraulic press. 1,100 atmospheres, equivalent to the Challenger Deep. 1,690 atmospheres. Human bone implodes. Entry 2. Update. Echo, Hanu, Quartz, Cytex, Mistletoe. On Europa. We lurk like summer vampires in the caskets of our smile pods. Our frames labor on the ice, building a cathedral to the sciences. Radiation is very bad outside. Even my assistant has taken ion damage out there. Pleased to see him healing flawlessly, vacant and empty as he is. What if this perfect self-repair is the reason the Exos degrade? I sulk in isolation as the crew works. My pride is wounded. Did I expect Clarity to come out and greet me? Hail to Clovis Bray, first among men! Yes, absolutely I did. The lunar artifact promised me a solution to the false modesty. Damn vanity, I'm different. Not for my present qualities, but for my future influence. I shine with noon's light, reflected back through time to this age of dawn. Perhaps the mind heals itself stiff, and this causes the billboarding, the stereotyped behavior, the final crash. I am going to be the Luca of all interstellar human civilization. It is a mistake to imagine that the greatest man, the God Emperor of history and ruler of circumstance, whose influence reaches to the end of time, will live into the future, the full flowering of human glory. That man lives now, the tiny bottleneck before the vast explosion, when it is still possible for an individual's decisions to touch the entire species and set the course of all future choices. Shit. Fucked up. Alright. Self-maintenance, so absolute that it becomes a static loop. Investigate. I said all this in my book, but my son's book still sells better. I suppose because Clovis Points is a much more approachable title than Competitive Immortality through Primogeniture of Future History, Ontology, or Phenology, PFHOR. My son's work appeals to those intellectual infants and the retro-nationals, and the parasites on common compassion support. Obviously, they support the softened, pre-chewed version of the truth. And there's also that bump of public sympathy for a dead man. Yet I cannot deny that, in simplifying my legacy, my son has improved its reach. He was one to formulate the famous two-sentence summary of PFHOR. Most of our energy should be spent in support of the things that are most like us. This is the only true responsibility of any living thing. And the slightly less famous addendum. The best way to spend energy is on things that make more things like us. Children are viral replicators of our ideas. But there is a certain terror about them. They alter our legacy, mutate it. As Clovis II modified competitive immortality through PFHOR into Clovis points. What if my children decide on some key amendment, some ineffable change, which makes my legacy no longer mine? How can I be reborn through the eternal reoccurrence of my life logic, if what my children pass down is the logic of some other Clovis? Some flawed copy, just as Clovis II was a flawed image of me. A flaw that I created in my clumsy eagerness to make him flawless. My second boldest decision during my son's development was to replace Clovis II's mitochondrial DNA, normally inherited from the mother, with my own. I had to know that I was in his cellular energies, powering his existence. It was not that change which killed him, but it is the fear of being replaced by a faulty duplicate that will kill me if I put off my brain upload much longer. I have a library of scanned volunteers above Hanu, but my own consciousness is not among them. A Moravec upload is slow and inadequate. What if there are quantum informatic elements to the mind not captured by such crude mechanical means? No, I insist on that perfect terminal quantum snapshot. For reasons of fidelity, the only perfect and lossless brain scan is also a destructive one. Clovis II died in one after all. I made the vessel to receive him. But I lacked the alkahest, the solvent to render it pure. But I dare not make the leap to a new body until I know how that body works. And so far, the exobodies are universally fatal. I must finish the exobody work to become the Luca, that one true divinity of man. And to do that, I need clarity. And clarity is here, All the signs point to it. If I succeed, no forgiveness for tight-fisted Ishtar fools. I know they had working prototypes. They could have shared. Corporeal status. Body at 35.5 degrees Celsius. Pulse 30 beats per minute. Strength modest. Blood pressure 90/60. Respiratory 6 breaths a minute. Pulse OX 140 to reduce free radicals and peroxynitrite. Today's blood mix is pure perfluorocarbon with new modified monocytes. God damn it, I can't talk. The new kidney is functioning well. Donor pig sacrificed, brined, and prepared as seared pork chops. Sous vide is for prissy nerds. Poor Watford. I wonder if I should reduce the volume of my stem cells and introduce the pig blastocysts. I feel too much empathy for them. Does PFH war compel me to take better care of Clovis pig chimeras than ordinary pork? Yes, but only to the extent that they can contribute to my legacy with cloned organs and good eating. No guilt. Note: savaging. The term for parents destroying their own offspring is savaging. It was a problem for pig farmers in the days when we raised livestock. Sows attacked their own piglets. No one has ever worked out a good explanation. One theory is that the mother pigs are frightened by their own young, terrified by these strange, noisy, needy things. Evolution is not a perfect optimizer. A trait like fear of your own offspring could endure if piglet mortality is already high. The ancient biologist, August Weismann, believed that we age to make room for the next generation, that we are programmed to die to leave a space for our offspring. Perhaps the sows simply acted in self-defense. No, Europa life. Now a bristling thing, large as a whale, appears on the ice bore camera we dropped into the ocean below. A dandelion made of soft arms. Bright red and yellow markings indicate it evolved in the shadows, where some light pierces the ice. The limbs wave slowly to and fro, a motion that is both hunting and breathing. Prey approaches, drawn by plankton that cake on the drifter's skin. With vegetable slowness, its limbs embrace the victim, sting it, and pull it into an open central stomach where thready parasites wait to infest and digest. Everything it does is slow and intestinal, pulsate, brainless. Sometimes the limbs bicker. Two are dead, fuzzy with rot. They have strangled each other. It's a colony organism. If threatened, it will discorporate. The limbs will spasm. The core will tear apart in a puff of fluids, and all those arms will slither away into the dark beneath the ice. Fat worms of terror searching for a hide. The digestive parasites will be expelled as a decoy, left to squirm in panic. I despise it. I would have it killed, except that I am repulsed by the thought of its final disintegration. I consider how to burn it. Entry 3. I died. What a nuisance. Corporeal status. Body at 13.7 degrees Celsius. Pulse 3 beats per minute. Weak. Irregular blood pressure not detectable. Pulse OX 600. Emergency anti-ischemic oxygen flood. Cryonic perfusion. Metabolic waste scavengers active. Clinical death duration 11 hours. Successful emergency hypothermic arrest. Reactive oxygen spike tamped. Interleukin blocked. Redox blocked. Ischemic repression injury fully averted. PPARs upregulated, squirrel lipid switch engaged. Prognosis? Good. Dropped dead at dysautonoma while rummaging for a leftover pork chop. I am now in recovery, in medical smile pod. I have no breath and no pulse. It is the return of oxygen to deaf tissue that does the most damage. Well, does the most of the damage. I should be asleep, but I have to get this down quickly. While I was dead, I had a dream. I was in a working exobody. I felt so strong. Everything was so vivid. No need for waxy eardrums or jelly eyeballs. Like seeing for the first time after a life of cataracts. I think I was immortal. The only unpleasant aspect of the experience was my amnesia. I couldn't recall my own name. I saw someone walking past me. I think it must have been Anastasia. And not only did I fail to recognize her, but it never even occurred to me that I should. When I awoke, I thought I must have had a near-death vision, so I checked my nerve logs. Every last spark in my brain is recorded. Nothing in that cerebral panic can account for my dream. The mind is the brain. It is impossible to have a vision without correlated neural activity, and yet I did. Wonderful. This is why I came here. Unmapped secrets, impossible dreams, a chance to pass beyond the infinite, escape the tyranny of casual closure. I wholeheartedly believe that the dream was a message from clarity, a promise of success. I struggle to explain what I will become. Luca. I borrow that term from biology, in the same way I consider Bray my extended phenotype. Its discoveries my mimetic grandchildren. We depart the cradle of this solar system to begin our colonization of the galaxy, the dominant ideology of our time. The core logic we use to organize and plan our relationship with the cosmos will be scattered to become the Luca, the last universal common ancestor of all future human growth. The Luca is the most recent common ancestor of all living things. For Earth life, it is a single cell that lived in the deep oceans billions of years ago, flourishing in the warmth of magma or sulfur vents. It was not the first life on Earth, but it was the only life whose descendants survived to the present. All its contemporaries have been extinguished by the passage of epochs. I plan to be the Luca of all future human thought. Now I remember Luca Brasi, the Corleone family heavy. Nupedia says that Brasi murdered his own infant child. Why? Why would he do such a thing? The article doesn't explain. Savaging again. Alright, so last universal common ancestor. Hmm. Note: clarity. Study of the lunar artifact retrieved from the K-1 mission provides insight into the effect I have deemed clarity. Clarity violates established symmetries and conservation laws. In doing so, it defied Noether's theorem, the most fundamental and beautiful cornerstone of physics. Symmetry and conservation are two sides of the same coin. All things are transformations of one thing, without gain or loss, as my childhood tutor put it. If A can become B, then B can become A. We say that state B, say a mixed drink, comes after state A, sugar and water, only because there are more probable pathways from A to B. Wait long enough, longer than the universe, and your drink really can return to state A, spontaneously unmixing itself. But clarity is not always symmetrical. For example, it violates time reversibility. Considering the simple equation, clarity A becomes B, this is the application of clarity to state A to produce a lower entropy state B. Clarity is fond of removing portions of a state configuration, heroing the phase space down to only its most robust inhabitants. Time symmetry suggests that we should be able to run this process in reverse and retrieve the original. Reverse clarity B becomes A. But in fact, we obtain reverse clarity B becomes C, where C is the same as in clarity becomes B. Clarity B becomes C. So if you reverse it, it just does the same as you put it normally. Clarity's effects cannot be used to return a transformed state to the original state. Instead, we obtain a second transformed state, further yet from the original configuration. What does this actually mean in common language? Invoke Loschmidt paradox is certainly not common language. Perhaps an allusion to... I believe that clarity may be akin to the mythical universe solvent, the alkahest, the azoth, which ancient alchemists believed had the power to dissolve anything into pure base elements. Ingested properly, the alkahest could purify the body and grant eternal life. Nonsense and poetry? Perhaps, but let me ask you this. Why do we exist? We exist because the universe began in a state of lower entropy, and has ever since expanded and unwound, transforming from a single dense plasma to a void filled with complex structures. In the future, it will achieve maximum entropy when all organized matter has collapsed into a black hole, and these holes evaporate into the uniformity of heat death. I wonder what clarity would do to a black hole. This is the unexplained secret of creation. How did that original low entropy state come to be? In the first place, in the first time, the egg of history. What if clarity was responsible? What if there was some primeval chaos, some pre-cosmic entropy, which was soaked in clarity to reduce it to the first nucleus of all existence, which issued the Big Bang? What if clarity's defiance of time reversibility makes it a fountain of cosmic youth, returning all that is burnt out and burnt down to a state before the fire? Perhaps clarity is the Ein Sof, the nameless God before creation, preparator of the cosmic egg, razor that cuts the fat of complication away from the bone. Those who comprehend the alkahest, it is said, will obtain eternal life. Message to Bray, Wilhelmina. Crypt, P key Clovis root, QD resist, SHOR, RNG sheet. I can talk. RNG seed AM241. Pad Willa. Warning! This transmission will expand entangled qubits for security. Wilhelmina, it's grandfather. I'm on Europa doing some very exciting work. I understand you're probably reluctant to enter into a collaboration, given my choices surrounding your father's treatment. But I sincerely believe that this will be the most important scientific project since the invention of agriculture. You know how I value minds that can run alongside my own. I fondly remember your childhood explanation of the myth of the alpha wolf. The truth, you told me, is that the so-called alpha is not a dominant male, but simply the father of the family. I remember with less fondness, but with equal respect, your later accusation that I had fully assumed the role of an immortal patriarch has clothed myself off from you. Megalos Kyros Pateres, you called me, in very poor Greek. On the day of my son's funeral! Let me show you what I was thinking of when I was not thinking of my family. Come to Europa. Help me. Save. Draft unsent. Message to Bray, Anastasia. Pad, Anna. Warning, this transmission will expend entangled qubits for security. Anastasia, it's your grandfather. I'm on Europa, doing some very exciting work. I understand you're probably reluctant to enter into any collaboration, given your memory of your father's treatment process. I also know that you've struggled with questions of belonging, not helped by my own attitude towards your genetics. Let me make amends. You've wasted enough on that paranoid machine. Both of us know that your attempts to fix the value capture problem are just bandages on an ethical wound. Come to Europa. Let's set aside the broken past and make a clean start. What I have here will change everything. We will be as immortal as your war mind, and far more human. Save. Draft unsent. Message to Bray, Elizabeth. Pad, Elsie. Warning. This transmission will expend entangled qubits for security. Come to Europa. I am taking an enormous risk. And this time, I am the one at risk. Let me prove to you I did nothing to your father that I wouldn't do to myself. There are significant dangers. Outside context threats. Your expertise would be invaluable. I need you. Send. So it seems like Elsie is the only one he actually sent those to. Wilhelmina and Anastasia, he saved them but didn't send them. Entry 4. I found her. Clarity control. The mystery I was promised. Analysis of the surrounding ice suggests it arrived on Europa no more than 20 years ago. Still, well before I encountered the K1 artifact. How long have they planned my invitation? Arrival event. Omnibus analysis of spallation products in the ice suggests recent X-ray bombardment. Characteristic decay of a Majorana massive light sterile neutrino. These neutrinos are associated with the lambda field and expansion of the early universe. So a blast of dark neutrinos struck this particular province of European chaos. The particle involved. Yep, more evidence that clarity is old as time. The alkahest that shaped the early universe. I wonder why clarity control chose the particular aspect it did. That form, that face, the same visage as the precursor on Earth's moon. What is it meant to communicate? Is it a message particularly meant for me? I have always harbored a wariness towards women. I understand people are as coiled engines of self-interest, programmed first by a cosmology that selects, via the anthropic principle, for the possibility of complex structure, often by a biology that wipes out traits deleterious to its own persistence. And then by a culture that evolves to promote the survival of its hosts. People are avatars of these self-preserving forces. I feel a purity and a righteousness to this understanding, unless we see people as they really are. It's the foundation of PFHOR. But all of this is complicated, women. They are the sites of such evolutionary complexity. The grandmother hypothesis, for example, or the asociality of female ants. Even their flesh is hard to understand. Female bodies are a mosaic of two cell lines. One with the mother's X chromosome active, one with the father's, never both. A house of two lineages constantly renegotiating their mutual interest. Is it that interior... I can't talk. Is that interior plurality, that secret depth, why Elizabeth, Wilhelmina, and Anastasia were so vehemently opposed to my plan for Clovis II's treatment? Out never fought this, but the girls were persistently difficult. Elizabeth has not replied to my message. I know she received it. I have to remind her of her own self-interest. Note: why exominds fail. Major obstacle to a viable exomind loop billboard crash cycle. Human consciousness in simula is not new. The equipment we provided Aero China for containment, the K1 anomaly, included simulated connectome forks of the mission crew as mineshaft canaries. The simulated environments are limited. If a simulated crew member wants to leave the mission and go home, they cannot. And that impossibility will cause divergence from the physical original. Even minute changes in the physical fidelity of the simulation can have chaotic effects. All cognition is embodied. The architecture of our minds is highly co-evolved with our physical form. In or out of simulation, only a true synthetic AI can dissociate from the human body plane. And there be dragons! Without common evolutionary legacy, there is no reason an AI should share our values. Given the limits of simulation, we need to find synthetic immortality in the real world. The grail of Homo simulacra is an artificial body with an immortal human mind. Attempts to upload human minds into frames, with their artificial sense and limited architecture, are uniformly terrifying and disagreeable. Early attempts at uploaded consciousness were haunted by the fears that the upload would suffer cryptic loss of qualia, the unseen death of the first-person conscious mind. The upload would then become a so-called billboard, a flat imitation. I lobbied the ISO to establish a standard for a certified conscious simulacrum. Any emulation of a human brain must display neural activity correlated with consciousness, particularly in the nuclei at the thalamus, midbrain, and pons. Modern philosophy is satisfied that all qualia have neural correlates. Many researchers refer to this criterion as the zombie test, or the zombie detector. The problem with exominds is they quickly stop passing the zombie test. The first stage of the breakdown is looping. The same repetitive, stereotyped behavior once observed in zoo animals. Prototype exominds began to repeat similar conversations and action schemes. This stereotype descends from high-level social behaviors through cognitive programs like memory recall and task selection and the basic motor functions. The mid-stage symptoms are pacing, chewing, rocking, grunting, striking limbs against walls or furniture, and facial tics. This is the result of depressed activity in the higher brain. Without input from the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia stop selecting new motor programs. The eventual, highly upsetting result is atheosis, a disorder categorized by slow, involuntary writhing motions of the limbs, digit, neck, and tongue. Early exobodies without governors on their paramuscle could tear themselves apart like starfish with wasting syndrome. This is how my son died. I am reminded of that hideous European thing. Why does my brain insist on free associating its way back to self-destruction? And again I return to savaging the young. The driver of this degenerative loop is a process we call billboarding. No matter how actively we stimulate the exobody, how rich we make its social and cognitive environment, and how powerful its sense is, we still observe the gradual shutdown of exoneurons. The neural correlates of consciousness in the mind brain are among the first to die. The exomind, despite acing the Turing test, no longer meets the ISS standards for consciousness. It is a philosophical zombie. Just taking note of this. I've had the uncanny experience of holding a long, rational conversation with an uploaded woman, only to discover she was unconscious the entire time. In fact, showed brain activity similar to deep asphyxia, death of lack of oxygen. The languid, ambiguous phrases that I found so intriguing were the result of a brain that had lost the neocortex. She was dead. Is watch done updating? No. It is, yay. Eventually, this shutdown proceeds far enough that the exomind cannot sustain its default network, the light in the windows of a living brain. We roll the brain state back and try again, but the outcome is inevitable. Why does this self-strangulation occur? At first, I believed the answer was simple. Like a tiger pacing in a zoo pen, the exomind did not receive enough stimulation from the exobody. A human in sensory deprivation will go mad. Perhaps the exobody deprived the mind of some vital but unrecognized sense. But now, I think I was on the wrong track. The problem is actually one of excessive self-causation. If, as the philosopher Wick proposed, we are that which we cause the most, and our future selves qualify as still truly us, only because they are primarily determined by our current brain state, then a paradox arises. To maintain ourselves, we must limit the amount of change we experience. For example, our brain cannot be changed into a cloud of hot gas without killing us. But what change is permissible? Would we not be our most ourselves if we never changed? If our future state was fully determined by our current state? I believe the human mind is engaged in a constant self-correction. In order to filter out external causation that might disrupt our self-loops, the mind screens out errors caused by cosmic rays, EM fields, prions, chemical misfires, irritated conversations, etc., by running a kind of constant checksum on itself. Perhaps this recursive self-checking is even the source of consciousness itself. Exominds, however, are immune to these natural sources of error. They are not messy enough. They do not suffer enough jitter, enough degradation. When we train AIs, we knock out random neurons in each learning cycle, forcing the AI to operate without them. This creates a more robust, stable intelligence. It also shows us why some random error in entropy is vital to keeping a brain alive. Without those random knockouts, the AI is vulnerable to overfitting, locking itself into a single, narrow, stereotyped behavior, perfectly adapted to a very specific set of stimuli, but otherwise catatonic and unresponsive. Without countervailing entropy, the very self-corrective process meant to maintain the human mind calcify and kill it. I believe this is why exominds fail. If the exominds are to be viable shelters against mortality, I think it's supposed to say mortality, but whatever, must find a useful source of noise. Emulation of biological error will not be enough. The exomind is designed for total immunity to such fleshy noise, after all. That source of error must be clarity. The effect generated by clarity control. But how can it be gathered, harvested, and applied? How can I change clarity from an abstract process to something tangible, incarnate, and usable? I know that it is possible. It's the reason I was brought here. Right, so exobrains are fractal, brain billboards, brain shuts down. Message to Bray, Elizabeth. I know your secret. Did you think you could keep it from me? Elizabeth, I keep track of every tiny change in your gene expression. I know when you so much as burp. You are my offspring. You are the most important thing in the universe to me, for you are an extension of my own self. I understand you're angry with me. I would be too if I'd watched my father come so close to salvation, only to die the way he did. Believe me, the groans and snaps of his exobody tearing itself apart haunt me almost as profoundly as the things we said over his deathbed. I failed your father. First, I tried to make him sleepless. When that failed augment eventually turned against him, I correctly identified the disease as fatal prion insomnia, while those incompetents were still blathering about unexplained cachexia. I even recognized that my boy's hypervigilant immune system would make gene therapy and polythiopine treatment ineffective. At every step, I was ahead of the problem and entirely focused on a solution. I was determined to transfer him to a new body, and I failed. That new body killed him. His final scan still sleeps in the family archives, awaiting, perhaps, some second chance. But what I am working on here could have saved him. Could save him still. And it can save you. You know that you have your father's disease, inherited from the same genes I so rashly engineered. You have the Clovis curse. There is no way to know exactly when it will strike, but once it does, I'm sure you've charted out exactly how it will progress. First, insomnia. Panic, hallucination, and fear. Extended hypnagogia and the loss of all dreams. You will sweat and your eyes will dwindle to points. You will go into menopause. You will try anti-prion treatments and gene therapy to correct the mutation, but your enhanced immunity will protect the very flaw that is killing you. You will try immunosuppressants, but they will be no match to the family arsenal. That did not make us to be easily edited. Within 2 years, you will be entirely unable to sleep. Dementia and wasting will follow. You'll be dead by then, but the husk you leave behind will continue to live, sustained by machines, unable to even dream of a time when it was Elizabeth Bray. Come to me. I'm dying too. Let us save each other. Save. Day 5. No, entry 5. Disaster at the work site. Clearly, we will not be moving clarity control like we did the K1 artifact. It reacted violently to the attempt. I have engineered 19 casualties. Into the log. No, goddamn it, I fucked up that entire sentence. I have entered 19 casualties into the log, since 19 engineers from the Hanu team were caught in the reaction. Though there were many more than 19 bodies when it was finished. I have sequestered the recordings, especially the sensorium telemetry. Quite upsetting. Yet I do not believe it was an act of hostility. Even this outburst carried themes of duplication, as if clarity control wanted to show it could help me. It whispers to me. I have been communicating with it, just as I did the K1 artifact. I dashed off a memo to the expedition team, all fully NDA'd, of course, with hashes of their brain state on file as proof of honesty. I tried to be plain. Yes, we will proceed with necessary caution, but I am now in contact with clarity control. I am in communication with an intelligence so far beyond our own, it can manipulate us like stones on a go board. Terrifying, obviously, but not malevolent. Not malevolent. If it wanted to extinguish us, according to Dark Force logic perhaps, it would simply drop a stranglet onto Earth. There's nothing it could possibly want from us that could not be obtained elsewhere. Even if it were so malicious as to feed on the raw suffering of conscious minds, it would be easier to build vast hell simulations or to engineer a custom species capable of limitless woe. If we are endangered by clarity control, it is only through accident or miscommunication, or punishment. Punishment is a key part of any teaching process. Still, I am keenly aware that there might be some danger I cannot foresee. So I have ordered an orbital platform constructed over the work site. If we need catastrophic containment or a quick and thorough redaction of our work here, the platform will excuse itself from its orbit and collide with the site. Europa's orbital dynamics make even high polar orbits very unstable, so the platform needs onboard power for course correction. A fission reactor makes sense. Requires less frequent refueling than a fusion plant, and it is easy to hide something in the design will allow it to achieve the extremely prompt criticality. Now we can proceed with peace of mind. Corporeal status. Body at 33.2 degrees Celsius. Pulse, 33 beats per minute. Strength, good. Blood pressure, 120 over 100. Respiratory, 10 breaths per minute. Pulso X90. Oxygen radical cleanup in progress. Today's blood mix is enriched pig's blood with new modified notocyte. Prepare for liver regeneration, gallbladder transplant underway. Fine, I'm coming. Wait, oh shit, I forgot this bit. Message from Bray, Elizabeth. Fine, I'm coming. If only to limit the damage you can cause. If you tell the family I'm sick, I will never speak to you again. I won't even let you treat me. You'll have to watch, helpless, as your own granddaughter falls victim to your mistakes. I hope you're still somewhat incapable of being troubled by that. I'll see. Entry 6. A gate. Of course, clarity control is inviting me to make a gate. The messenger hypothesis. Aliens would seek the most efficient method of interstellar contact. Starships are slow, fragile, and massive. It is easier to send a set of instructions for a message receiver or a construction blueprint for a portal. This explains the reports of visions and paranoia at the K1 site. The idiots were receiving a message, but they failed to divine the true purpose. Or perhaps the invitation was only extended to me. And it is an invitation. But I will need more data, more talent to answer it. I feel that the gate Clarity Control wants me to build is not any former product of Clarity itself. The design, I think, is X. Those pestilential nuisances encountered on Venus and occasionally elsewhere. If I need a Vex Gate to fulfill Clarity Control's purpose, then I will make a Vex Gate in the simplest way. I will have a Vex build one for me. I know exactly where to find one. The only trick will be concealing the fact I have taken it. Asset activation. Venus Ishtar Management Trust Fall. Venus Ishtar Labor Dennis. Venus Aerospace ISR Sal. Venus Aerospace Cargo Warbler. The raid on Ishtar Collective went off flawlessly. Some casualties during the outbreak, of course. They were woefully unprepared for their artifacts to switch, to expand and exploit behavior. Necessary sacrifices, alas. They died meaningful deaths for a vital human project, even if they didn't know it. Heroes, everyone. After Rasputin intervened with frames and orbital fire, there was an urgent need for search and rescue. An easy task to have one of our ships slip away with a specimen. By the time Ishtar is up and running again, they'll attribute the missing artifact to damage during the battle. The stolen machine is now at work building the gate I require. The gate shares nothing in common with the structure of Clarity Control. In fact, I'm not sure it has a structure at all beyond the gross material form and some apparently arbitrary interior complications. Even the materials are elementally basic. Perhaps the design is old on a cosmic scale, dating back to an era before supernovas, where there was little free metal. I think the structure of the gate is simply a password, a configuration of symbols which will be recognized by some distant technology. A connection will be made. And what will we find when we pass through? The Babylon of the universe? The Silk Road of some cosmic union. I will be the first, of course, but I will not go in the flesh. I will use my assistant as remote proxy. It's all so exciting. I can corporeal alert. Body at 30.2 degrees Celsius. Emergency cooling. Pulse AFib. Defibrillating. Pulse oxygen 110. Supportive oxygen. Inducing protective syncope. Note. The water in the wave. Quickly, have to get it down. I was a beast upon the earth. A salamander or an eel. Water passed through that earth as streams passed through a garden. Beside each stream grew sweet grass. Not much of it, but enough to feed little aphids, who lived mean and starving lives. Now there came an upwelling of water from the earth, so the streams ran fat and slow. The grass grew thick. The aphids mated and multiplied. Ants came to enslave the aphids, and the aphids joined together to oppose them. And in victory they returned to tend to their grass, to aerate its roots and spread its seeds. So they did thrive. Now it occurred to me that I might join the streams by crawling between them on my belly. Having done so, I saw I might dam one stream to divert its water into the other. The aphids on the first stream came to me in protest, but I said to them, "Go to the new pond I've made, and join the aphids there in cultivation, and I will send more water unto you." And they were greeted by the joining. Thus, I proceeded to join all the streams together into one pond. Whenever the aphids of a small stream might protest, I said to them, "No, look at my pond, and see the plenitude I have provided to my people there." When it became necessary to stop those upstream from polluting the water, I offered them the bounty of our pond, the grass and the watercress. And if they did not yield, I sent the ant fighters against them, because their petty good injured the good of all. I appointed ministers of water and soil and seed and war, and to the most loyal I gave these posts as a reward. But ultimately their power depended on me, for they were aphid and I was Leviathan. In time, I became the coordinator of all water and the dispenser of fertility. Then, I became the coordinator of coordinators, and I gave up control of thirst and life for control of those who had control. And all my craft became the pure and abstract management of power. Note: reminds me of a book theory and practice of something by E. Goldstein, or that Michel's track about oligarchy. Then I saw upon the horizon a wave, and the wave was God, and it approached me, saying, "We are as one, you and I. We are the gathering of the waters. Gather unto me as they have gathered unto you. We will be as one." The aphids screamed and begged me for salvation, but I was not of them. I was of the wave. Clearly a message from Clarity Control. And written in allegorical large print, I am, in the eyes, or whatever precepts possesses of clarity, the leader of humanity. This is why they contacted me. This is why they want me. They're an association of coordinators, those whose choices cause change, and they're inviting me into their pantheon. We must finish this gate. Let me check something. Message to Bray, Elizabeth. I see that your ship is making its orbital insertion. I trust the progress on Bray's station will impress. It makes a fine mooring point, if you please, and its transmat facilities are the quickest way down to the surface. There is no luxury as fine as a good telephoretic network. It gets you to the edge of the map, where the real work begins. I'll want to examine you as soon as you arrive, just to get a baseline measurement on the progress of the disease. The transmat system is, unfortunately, not an adequate imager. As you're well aware, transmat obeys the no-cloning theorem, functioning precisely because it doesn't allow us to store or copy information transmitted. Otherwise, there'd be no need for exobodies. We could simply print healthy copies of ourselves from the transmat. Perhaps Willa will one day learn how to engramize and duplicate the human form. I promise I won't conduct any brain scans. If we're ultimately going to transubstantiate you, we'll wait until I'm certain the exobodies are safe, and I'll vow to obtain your full consent. I prepared an itinerary, starting with a review of our security, and then an introduction to our captive Vex worker. I want your insight on everything related to containment and control. I know you had strong feedback about how the K-1 mission was handled. You'll see that certain areas of our facilities are off limits. They're under my personal authority. I'll keep them sequestered for everyone's safety. I know you'll be curious anyway. I won't condescend to give you instructions you won't obey. But know that your attempts to penetrate those areas won't succeed. Welcome. We have so much to do. Entry 7. We pass through the gate. Myself and my team. Elizabeth insisted on coming. I could hardly call her all this way and then refuse her. Exobody status. Proxy mode. Remote operator. Microwave repeater link. Internal temperature. 222 kelvins. Superconducting media located. Diamond anvil. Hydrogen sulfide. Carbon nanotube mesh. Remote sensorium latency 16 milliseconds. Q dot battery charge. 10,100 years at a current load. Spintronics in neuromorphic mimetic mode. What lay beyond? Gateway analysis. A non-gravitating, purely geometric transversal wormhole of Ellis configuration. There is no singularity and no firewall. Interesting ramifications for ER equals EPR. The wormhole manifold provides a pathway to another 4-point in our space-time, or in a nearby parallel universe in the quantum many-worlds ensemble. We passed into a gallery of awesome light. It struck us to our knees. The probe imagery did not prepare us. A curtain of blue-violet fire filled an entire half of the sky, pebbled with granules, seething with promotionaries and flames. We stood beneath a blue hypergiant, titan of suns, looming over all. It should have killed my human-bodied companions instantly. With peak radiance in the far ultraviolet, it would cook flesh. But the probes said it was, impossibly, safe for life. They fanned out into the ancient stone ruins, pierced by dull metal towers and flickering lines of light. Though the rock was cracked and pitted by radiation, our geologist identified it at once. Felsic granite, he reported. No iron, no heavy metals at all. A lot more sodium, oxygen, boron, and aluminum than I'd expect, and a lot less silicon. Oh my god. What? I demanded. This rock is almost 13 billion years old, the geologist whispered. It formed with the very first generation of planets, less than 1 billion years after the universe was born. We are standing on a dissected piece of one of the first worlds. That's not possible, the astronomer protested. It's a typo hypergiant up there. They're lucky to live 2 million years. And its metallicity is 15 sigma above average. That is not an old star. I opened my proxy arms to the light. The gate had taken us to a miracle. This star was big enough to fill the solar system of the Sun to the orbit of Neptune. Bright enough to shine like a full moon, even from the distance of Alpha Centauri. Here I was, unblinded. Fuck, I can't talk. Something had tampered with the star. Our physicist identified a lensing effect, magnifying the star's optical size and redshifting its radiation. It was as if the whole behemoth was wrapped in some kind of skin. But that was only the beginning. Hypergiant stars are so bright that the outward pressure of their radiation tends to blow off in the corona. In the last million years, this star has exhaled more than 30 times the mass of Earth's sun into its 2,000 km/h stellar wind. Its remaining mass still exceeds our sun's by a factor of 259. We assume the star could not be 13 billion years old because stars this hot and bright die swiftly. But that was before we saw... Our instruments identified glints of brighter light against the sunfire. They were orbiting mirror clusters, gathering the star's radiation and focusing it back, burning wounds in the photosphere. These solar stigmata hemorrhaged endless flares, geysers of energy and precious metals. Above those cutting mirrors, rings encircled the star like garrote wires. These were particle accelerators, generating blades of electromagnetic force that stabbed down into the star's skin, through photosphere and tacticline, towards the core. They're stirring it, I realized, to pull the metals out of the core and send fresh hydrogen down to fuse. Is it possible they had refueled the star? They were stoking it. Enormous portals dumped streams of hydrogen into the giant, replenishing its mass and fusion power. At this obscene size and brightness, this star should have gone supernova in less than the 2 million years it would take for a single photon to crawl from the core to the surface. But with careful refueling, that supernova could be averted. This giant might have been here since the dawn of time. Perhaps this star had begun as some metal-poor population 2 dwarf, surrounded by meager rocky planets. But the inhabitants of one of those planets had found a way to pump their sun full of hydrogen, supercharging it, pushing it to the edge of stability, all in the name of making metal. In the early universe, elements heavier than helium were unthinkably rare. So these firstborn aliens built a forge, a fusion smelter for the atoms they needed. We turned outwards, hoping to locate pulsars in the sky and therefore fix our position. But the stars were blocked out by a swarm of bronze disks. They were satellites, a shell of artificial worlds hovering on the star's disks. Years ago, I'd proposed tearing apart Mercury to form a shell like this. And here, I found my ambition achieved 1,000-fold. It seems our gate had delivered upon us one of these satellites. We ventured out into the ruins, onto an island of living glass, broken by fissures of deep green light and reservoirs of white fluid. Around the glass, a shallow sea trembled with tiny intersecting waves. In one direction, a cloud of mist obscured a shattered tower, its form uncannily different from the surrounding architecture. Above us loomed structures linked by bolts of lightning, reminiscent of the citadel ruins on Venus. And that was when, in spite of the awesome power on display, I felt a crushing disappointment. There was no trace of Clarity's influence here, at all. Except perhaps that mysterious tower. Didn't make note of this. Shit, fucked that up. This was a Vex construct, and it was an ancient and formidable one. But in a few minutes, I had already grasped its overall purpose. It was no longer an area of crisis and potential, somewhere off the edge of the map. Just mighty clockwork. I had come hoping for a meeting with the unknowable. Instead, I found an engineering museum. Oh, we could explore it for thousands of years and not touch a single percent of its wonder. But Clarity had promised me a solution to immortality. I had promised Elizabeth a cure. I needed a way to use Clarity as a solvent and seed for my exobody. How would I find it here? Perhaps the Vex themselves were the key. I knew that the Ishtar Collective had achieved stable simulations of human minds. They refused to share their method with me. What if they had stolen the method from the Vex they studied? I called over one of my scientists, an Sundaresh. I want to bring back samples, I told her. There will be some risk. The Vex are not always docile. Some of the Soul Second even suggested we were in a state of war with the Vex. I felt their responses were more like the stings of drowsy hornets. Is your team ready to accept the risk? She nodded at my proxy. Of course, Mr. Bray. We've come this far. No sense in going home unless we bring something with us. I dispatched teams to collect Vex samples. When they began to harvest fluid from the nearby reservoir, a group of lightly armed Vex platforms attacked them with inaccurate weapons fire. Elizabeth replied with a matter laser, a grotesquely disproportionate weapon. A coherent matter pulse bears the same relation to an ordinary bullet that a gamma laser does to a flashlight. There was nothing left to salvage. I explained to her that we must proceed as investigators, not conquerors. If we simply scavenge and abduct out of curiosity, the Vex will reply in kind, and that is a risk we can manage. We must not provoke them to war. Note: Vex fluid. Specimen report. Volume of fluid recovered from Vex reservoir, located on a satellite hovering above the Forge star, 2082, Volantis. Colloquially, Vex mind fluid, or Vex milk. Informatic exchange with any Vex substrate has proven hazardous. The Ishtar Collective's data Elizabeth had analyzed warns against risks ranging from physical infection by Vex cytostructures to transmission of substrate-free syntactic replicators, malignant onomemes, and viral semiotic signifiers. A particular nuisance to have Vex ideas suddenly assigned a basic concept in your mind. You want to think about an apple, instead your brain chokes on code. I therefore proceeded under Sol Second's wildfire, hex-tempered, and brain-stained protocols. Vex milk is non-Newtonian, highly conductive, and non-comprehensible. Its viscosity and surface tension are variable. It could form a resistant membrane, or climb the walls of a container like a superfluid. I've even observed the milk store kinetic energy in zero viscosity vortices, essentially liquid flywheels. One must be careful when stirring it, lest it retain the motion for some future escape. Chemically, the Vex milk is an alkaline solution of dense salts and water. The salts range from sodium and calcium to lead, and even in barely detectable amounts, plutonium. Not good to drink. We finally have freaking information on what Vex milk is. Finally have freaking information. Suspended in this solution are cells in a silicate structure, 100 to 200 micrometers in size. Their shapes are heterogeneous but always geometric, reminiscent of Earth's radiolarian protozoa. Many have needle-like pseudopods, which transform between stiff spines and modal whips on the basis of some piezoelectric response. Imaging of internal structure detects a nucleus, and a genetic molecule analogous to SMA, though I speculate read-write times are much faster, on the order of milliseconds, perhaps exploiting some quantum effect. I've allowed Dr. Sundaresh to assist me with this work. She has discovered several levels of abstract higher order to the motion of these radiolarian cells. Some of these ensembles are distributed across space, some across time. All admire remarkable beauty. The sensitivity and chaos of fluid media seems to suggest an intrinsic Vex sustainability for certain difficult computations. Perhaps this is reflective in the nature of Vex thought, porous and miscible. I would request a telemetric analysis from an AI comm resource if I did not expect the tyrant to get his grubby Russian paws on my data. I hesitate to apply anthropomorphic concepts of intelligence, self-awareness, or even sentience to such an alien cognition. But I strongly suspect that each radiolarian element is in communication with its neighbors, and possibly even retains a holographic record of larger structure. So, we could safely assign the trait called Schroeder thalience to the Vex milk, the ability to communicate internal states to others and to model the external state of the world. I note that Vex milk, while computationally powerful, seems to avoid seismosis. That is, it prefers to mimic actual dynamics of phenomena rather than assigning a symbol. This is a fundamental difference between Vex cognition and our own. We encode inputs as symbols, manipulate the symbols according to some logical rules, and produce output. The Vex are more direct. Burn them, and they will extinguish the fire, not because they possess a symbolic knowledge of fire and properties, because their internal structure is so suited to adaptation and survival that the heat of the fire directly becomes the response required to snuff it out. Rather than encoding symbols, they generate self-sustaining and self-correcting patterns, which, like the suspension bridge flexing under strain, can adapt destructive input and produce repertory output. When we are affected by Vex memes, as the Ishtar data warns against, I suspect that we are simply experiencing Vex patterns jumping from one substrate to another, recruiting our own brains and bodies as media for their spread. It is not hostility. It's simply their way of interacting with the universe. And that is transubstration, that migration to another substrate, not what I seek here on Europa. Perhaps clarity has been very generous indeed. Still checking shit. The Ishtar researchers felt that this asymbolic mode of thought raised a disturbing possibility. The Vex might not communicate or interact with us by understanding our language, but instead by creating eternal copies of our minds, They would prod and stimulate those internal copies to see how they behaved. If they chose to destroy us, they learned how to do it by torturing and destroying those internalities. The enemy of the Vex is to be reproduced, experimented on, and cut off within their mind space. Elizabeth is monumentally disturbed by this, which is highly inconvenient. Despite my efforts to soothe her with fine dining and conversation, she has begun to question the very idea of cybernetic immortality. Aren't the Vex a perfect demonstration of what could go wrong? She demanded. Human minds trapped in a totally inhuman context, tormented and mutilated by unsympathetic alien gods. If we want to preserve our minds for eternity, couldn't we end up that way? Aren't we giving up the grace of death? The promise that all suffering will end? Elizabeth, I countered, perhaps too sharply, the Vex are already doing this to our minds. They will do it whether we are in weak flesh or durable metal. They got into our bodies, to our blood, we will be far safer in an exo-body. In fact, I can think of no finer way to resist Vex infiltration. Dr. Sundaresh requests further expeditions to the Forge Star for material. She does not trust the other members of her team, claiming suspicion of Vex exposure. Prefers to work directly with me. Very well, but I wonder what peculiar internal motives she harbors. I reformatted my assistant. No sense taking risks. Who knows what might get into my head through the proxy link. 1 second, I'm going to grab a charger and then I will continue. And in the meantime, ponder upon this shit. I am back and I have obtained fluids. Alright. Entry 8. Eureka. The Vex radiolarian fluid is obviously too virulent for use in exominds. But if exposed to clarity, the Vex patterns break down. The fluid takes on some of the properties of clarity itself, namely, its productive effect. Introducing a tiny aliquot of this refined clarity into an exomind solves the loop billboard crash cycle. As far as I can tell, permanently. The combination of Vex fluid and clarity is the key to cybernetic immortality. Speculation. The interaction of clarity, with its caustic anti-structural properties, and the Vex mind fluid, with its highly physicalized and asymbolic architecture, creates a physicalized algorithm that can serve as a random seed for the knockout required to sustain a viable exomind. I'll never sell that to a board. Easier to say that the exomind is too stiff and deterministic to support human consciousness, which depends on some random failures and turbulence to keep it simple. Clarity provides an algorithmic seed, adding error to every operation, which replicates that original turbulence. No need for software evaluation of organic chaos, because we can emulate it in hardware now. I uploaded a connectomere from my library into an exobody head treated with the Clarity Vex preparation. A full destructive scan of an aging Georgian volunteer, one Dr. ADAI Zook. I think he believes he's in a nightmare. Fear not, Mr. Zook. I would never mistreat the beginnings of something so wonderful. You will be the first of many. They shall march out of this European laboratory and sweep away every conformity, every disease, every loss, until all humanity rests in the loving permanence of my exobodies. The future will look to me in humble gratitude. The problem is, of course, that we're going to need more Vex fluid. Too complex. Exomind too harsh and cold. Clarity plus Vex fluid is the spice, the secret sauce, the oil of easy function. Corporeal status. Body at 37.6 degrees Celsius. Recommends supplementary cooling. Pulse, 110 beats per minute. Stroke or rest risk. Blood pressure, 150 over 100. Pulse oxygen, 150. Blood volume overfill. Oxygen radicals over safe levels. Recommend tap and wash cycle. Warning. Body status not sustainable. Recommend smile pod sabbatical. Message to Bray, Elizabeth. I finished my work up on your exam data. Sorry, Elizabeth. The disease is already activated. There are defective prions in your spinal fluid, which means they are replicating throughout your brain. Without the treatment, you have 15 months. If we fought the prions with aggressive cytomachine injections, immunosuppressants, and gene therapy, you could last 5 or 6 years. We could even alter your sensorium to knock you out and emulate sleep. That might give you enough quality of life to conduct some final research and say your goodbyes. I know I have been a cruel and domineering grandfather. You and your sisters have speculated that I intentionally sabotaged your father's genome so he would never outlive me without my help. That doesn't bother me. Actually, I wish I had thought of it myself. To force my own beloved progeny to either achieve synthetic immortality or die in agony. Now that would be a commitment to greatness. But I never wanted to hurt my grandchildren. Grandkids have always been my favorite. Do you remember that old Clovis Bray contract I showed you? We want your grandchildren. My collaborators could keep the rights to their inventions, but Bray Tech would have the unexpected combinations of those inventions. Grandchildren are unexpected creations, the wonderful knock-on consequences of reproduction. We have children, rather than making clones of ourselves, because the exploration of possibilities lets us find new ways to survive a changing universe. The 52-card playing deck has never been shuffled the same way twice in the entire history of the universe. Imagine how many possible grandchildren I could have produced. And out of all those possibilities, I got you. The finest of them all. I owe you the salvation I couldn't give your father. Please, consider making a terminal scan and decanting your mind into an immortal exobody. I myself plan to do it soon. Message from Bray, Elizabeth. I don't trust you. You made the same promises to Father, didn't you? I won't put myself in one of your humaniform torture dolls until you can prove it's safe. And even then, I don't know. I don't know if I want to be part of your Luca dream. Stop trying to get that rhubarb compote recipe right. You serve it at every dinner, waiting for me to say it's just like Grandma made it. It's pathetic. And you wonder why I'd rather eat with the crew. Delete. Entry 9. The infrastructure is in place. We are now in limited exobody production. I have allowed small Vex platforms to pass through the gate from 2082 Volantis. Apparently intent on construction infrastructure on this side. They're captured, drained, and discarded. Their mind fluid goes to clarity control, and the alkahest flows back. The machine of immortality has begun its slow turn. Oh, so they do come through the portal. In ancient days, they believed that the source of the alkahest was the Philosopher's Stone. I have made my own source after the deepest, oldest stone. A place where the dead go to rise again. A Deepstone Crypt. Gray Station guarantees our security from above. Your open life project provides deniability and cover. The infrastructure around clarity control will expose the Vex radiolarian fluid to the clarity, deliver it to the exobody manufacturing site. Elizabeth keeps trying to penetrate the networks around clarity control, but I have air-gapped everything. The physical coffers are secure. Once the exobodies are prepared, I will upload the minds from my research library. A century of volunteers waiting for reincarnation. The first generation is already coming online. But I will not be one of them. Not yet. Neither will Elizabeth. A true upload requires a maximum resolution subneural scan, and such a scan is invariably fatal. That means I will only get one shot. I will not take it until the exos are stable. I refuse to be an alpha tester of my own immortality. I am opening 2 new off-the-books labs to study the Vex and effects of clarity. If humanity is going to fully transmigrate into these immortal bodies, then the eternal welfare of all future generations depends on spotting and avoiding any dangers now. I can justify taking extreme measures. One of my most tantalizing projects involves A. Miller, a young man who suffers from a nanoparticle-induced degenerative immune disorder. I've been testing radical new imaging techniques on Mr. Miller, hoping to secure a non-destructive scan that still meets the requirements for a full-faith upload. Unfortunately, Mr. Miller's dosage of various fixing compounds and imaging radiation is approaching its limits of clinical toxicity. Despite blood and CSF washes, I fear its tumors will escape our control. I am curious about the therapeutic potential of X-Fluid. I plan to abstain as informed consent for a human trial. Sundaresh comes and goes at odd hours. Her behavior is erratic. Yesterday, she discussed the possibility that we'd be eternal collaborators in exobodies, and I believe she even flirted with me. An hour later, she was as cold as the ice outside and put her hand up to silence me whenever I spoke. An hour after that, she glowed with joy as she went on about her dear wife. Then she wept. I'm not sure whether to blame my confusion on my own concept of women, or on Sundaresh's racing mind. I cannot tolerate such volatility, and I would dismiss her instantly, except her supervision seems the key to the successful entrapment of Vex we need. She has a knack. I should give a name to the figurehead Clarity Control presents to the world. I've ordered a new herd of organ-growing pigs. I plan to be here a while. Elizabeth will still not commit to a scan. I fear she will die in some accident, and I will lose her forever. Warning. The following organs require urgent replacement. Liver, gallbladder, duodenum, mesentery, thymus, spleen, cornea. The following systems require replenishment: lymph, blood plasma, skin basal layer, basal lamina layers, Alport syndrome risk, intercellular cytosol. Odd, kind of looks like a keyhole. Those are lungs. Don't know what's going on there. Note, DER. Infuriating. With 12 alkahest-seeded exos now online, I find myself beached on the shoals of another serious problem. Not a transitional trauma after all. Not a temporary ailment. And quite fatal. Mr. Zuck was the first to succumb. He continued to insist that he was living in a nightmare. He complained of hunger, of thirst, breathlessness, and a rot in his bowels. I became concerned that he was billboarding, but his exoneuron activity remained healthy. Shortly after, Mr. Zuck developed a full-blown Cotard delusion. I found him trying to chisel his face off with a table shim. He insisted that his true face was covered in a thick layer of keratin. Toenail was his exact word. And that the rest of his body was already dead and rotting. He became violent. I had to paralyze his motor functions with diagnosis. This only made things worse. Without the satisfaction of motor feedback, he disassociated entirely. He stopped forming new memories, which trapped him in an 8-second loop of panic. After I resumed his motor functions, I watched him fill every page of a notebook with the words, "I have just died. I am trapped in the corpse. Now I am certain I am dead. Death has taken me completely. I have just finished dying." Activity in his temporal lobes collapsed. He lost his ego barrier and achieved metaphysical oneness with the universe. Unfortunately, this spread his Cotard delusion to the entire perceptual cosmos, and he rejected the resulting necro-reality as intolerable. I have not ever before seen such all-consuming terror and dread. In the final stages of the disease, he insisted that he had been possessed by some sort of ancient Carvalian spirit, a memory of his upbringing in Georgia. He was insistent that the spirit was female. It is an idiosyncrasy of the Peruvian-Georgian creation myth that the male spirit is divine while the female is demonic. Soon, Mr. Zuck's fear and panic were simply too much for him to bear. He retreated into catatonia, and then he crashed. Well, I still have the connectomy scan I used to make him. That Mr. Zuck can live again, but the Zuck who evolved over the past several weeks, the Zuck I had so many endearing arguments with, is lost. Elizabeth is more and more suspicious. She asks what exactly makes me think these exos will turn out any better than her father did. She demands to know what I'm doing with the Vex salvage, and whether it has to do with my plans for her survival. I have hastily deleted all records of the treatment of Mr. Miller, lest she think I plan to dose her with Vex fluid. Sundaresh came upon me just now. She seems fascinated by my distress. She said several comforting things, and then made one extremely unpleasant suggestion that my pride and haste had caused Mr. Zuck's death. I've decided to hate her. Warning. Novel prion detected in body collagen. Hypothesis. Jovian magnetosphere promotes highly abnormal protein folding. Prognosis. Massive sloughing and fraying of basement membranes. Loss of tissue binding. Inhibited durotaxis of new cells. Delamination of all body tissues into thin sheets. You will fall apart like an old book. Note. 4-star. In an effort to keep them engaged with their new bodies and stave off the dissociative rejection that killed Mr. Zuck, I have assigned my exos to scout through the gateway. The Vex satellite has a surface area larger than Earth, so we have plenty of exploring to do. I cannot believe I actually find it tiring, but the sheer scale and passivity of the Vex constructs infuriates me. Until I can synthesize my own version of the mind fluid, the Vex are necessary to the work. But I find their indifferences verminous. They licked the same emotions as the fat cockroach wandering across the wall. Disgust, contempt, unease at the thought that these mere machines, these automata, are flourishing all around us. And I fear that if troubled, they might swarm from their hides to run across our feet. The glare of the hypergiant 2082 Volantis gives me a headache even through proxy. I wonder if the effects evolved here, in the briny sea of the first planets. Due to the absence of heavy elements worth stealing and the abundance of simple compounds for growth, they never developed predation. Why bother? Plenty to go around. Instead, the violent radiation of the early universe selected for an otherworldly resilience, and for the ability to transmute energetic disaster into an opportunity for growth. The weak would be burned away by gamma ray bursts, and the strong would learn to harness that fire, not the oxygen fire of our own Paleolithic, the nuclear fire of the atom. They're basic cooperative signals. Food here, reduced density, generate new colony, must have formed from the basis of swarm behavior, a simple game capable of storing information in self-repeating patterns. It is not strictly correct to call the Vex a group mind. Rather, they are one master pattern spread across many elements, fractally self-similar. Very early they must have developed armor, perhaps a hydrogel to soften gamma rays or plates of silica to trap water. They would need that shield to enter the shallows and capture ionizing radiation as fuel. No wonder they thrive near stars. Cooperation in group meshes of armored radiolaria, protecting harvesters beneath, would promote the evolution of even larger structures. They became microscopic tool users, building fortresses and mouse sheets, storing the programs for those structures and the patterns of their swarms. I wonder how early they stumbled upon physics. Far sooner than humanity, no doubt. Their cellular nature provides an easy analogy for the quanta of matter, energy, space, and time. The tides of their sea would connect them to the motion of heavenly bodies, and even the deadly background radiation would make a natural observatory for high-energy physics. Their first exoskeletons were probably soft shells of shielding gelatin, just sacks of ooze. How far they've come. It is admittedly interesting to consider the philosophical consequences of their evolution. The Vex provide that nature is not all red in tooth and claw. Cooperation comes naturally to the Vex, whose great problem was survival in a harsh world, not a struggle over limited resources. They never found any payoff in selfishness. Human beings may require a Leviathan to coordinate the laws of social existence, as I was Leviathan to the Dream Aphids. But the Vex are as fundamentally cooperative as bricks. Utopian? No, not at all. They are without meaning. They have no experience and no subjectivity. The Vex are incapable of conceiving any image but their own. They do not recombine their DNA to make children or form relationships with other individuals. When the world does not match their eternal pattern, they alter the world to suit it. There is no difference between reality and simulation to them. Inside is the same as outside, and the two must be made to correspond. Oh, they are creative. Don't mistake me, but their creativity is demanding. It is the creativity of a furnace. What I am saying is the Vex are immortal. The Vex have no children. They are the ancestor to descendants of themselves. First mothers, first children, all at once. This is why I do not hesitate to pillage their home for resources. This is why I must guarantee that it is life in my image which inherits the cosmos. Had I the means, I would wipe them all from existence. Entry 10. All 12 members of the first EXO cohort are dead. The symptoms of their disassociation became extreme. One poor man developed complete exopraxia and exocalia. His empathy was so overgrown that he could not help but mimic or repeat whatever I did and said. Even when I entered the command to terminate him, he mimicked me, and I suffered a brief terror that his gesture would end my life. I kept Elizabeth far away from this disaster, so as to not discourage her. She is busy with the Vex, and with her covert attempts to reach clarity control. This has forced me to rely on Sundaresh. But unfortunately, Sundaresh has confronted me after the last death. 9 of them had Kotar delusion, she screamed at me, quite hysterically. They believed they were dead. One of them told me that she was in hell, and now was another damn soul sent to deceive her. Was she even wrong? The rest were worse. Do you know what the other principal manifestation of the Cotard delusion is, Clovis? I told her that I did not, and that I wished to proceed immediately with autopsies of their terminal brain states. Delusions of immortality. At least when they insist upon it, Clovis. We recognize it as a pathology. The only true responsibility of any living thing, I reminded her, is to support and nurture the things that are most like us. And if I am most like myself, Doctor, then I have an ethical obligation to avoid death. That is your son's quote, she snapped. You know, I've seen the video of his final days. That naked white exo, just paramuscle and soft membrane, writhing in its cradle. When you were done with him, he looked like nothing more than a slug, Clovis. A twisted, limbless giblet. Did you support and nurture him while you tortured him to death? I immediately ordered Miss Sundaresh transferred to the Vex lab to perform contact experiments. Unfortunately, she has taken the unethical step of deleting her own employee records, so I cannot nullify her future prospects as thoroughly as I might wish. Her conduct was extremely unprofessional. Mr. Miller has also passed. The poor young man had a bad reaction to the titrated denatured Vex fluid we were using as last-ditch therapy. The substance did restore damaged structures very well, but we were ultimately unable to control its more radical, transformative effects. I had a very encouraging final conversation with him, in which he thanked me for all my efforts and encouraged me to continue my work. I called in a team of psychologists to interview the next cohort of exos and make recommendations. They have settled into the Eventide habitat and have proven immediately very helpful. It was obvious to them that the root of the problem lay in the deficient exobodies they had supplied. Deficient how? I demanded to know. They did not suffer human weakness. They never needed to eat, drink, breathe, sleep, mictuate, or dream. Apparently this was the problem. I assumed that the need for these irritations would pass, since there would be no shortage or accumulation of poisons to trigger them. But evolution's tangled ways cannot be so easily rationalized. I was wrong. Their brains concluded that all their internal processes had failed. No digestion, no breath, no heartbeat, no sense of interoceptive health. All signs of death. These must logically contribute to the dissociative rejection of their physical forms, the Cotard delusion. When it was set in, they believed their bodies to be alien or necrotic form that must be cut away. And if you believe that you are sewn into a corpse, it is only natural to go mad with fear. My exos are dying of an extreme kind of bodily dysphoria. It seems that our exo designs will need various human-like traits to reassure the brain, and is not asphyxiating or starving or in a state of permanent yet undying cardiac arrest. Alas, mimicry of life's trivialities is not an interesting problem. I'll leave this change in the hands of others. I am much more interested in the surprising success of memory wipes. I became so tired of answering the questions asked by new exos. What happened to the scanning clinic? How long has it been? Would I let them see their families? I began introducing retrograde amnesia before spin-up. Interesting, this seems to improve their resilience against exomind rejection. From now on, we will block access to pre-upload episodic memory. We should also consider a built-in procedure to block memories formed after the exobody transubstantiation, returning them to a factory state should the need to restart occur. It would be very difficult to actually track down and delete the full memory engrams since they're stored in so many scattered parts of the brain. Instead, we can tourniquet off associative access to those memories and let them wither away in isolation. A memory is not a recording, after all. It is a set of instructions to reenact a brain state, choreography for a play. And like any play, it will fade if left unperformed. With the Exobody project proceeding apace, I believe the time approaches to decant myself from this dying body and enter my assistant's form. But if I do, will I lose my own memories? Will I cease to be myself, replaced by a faux Clovis, a mumbling facsimile? Unacceptable. Elizabeth will have to go first. Warning. Organ functions in terminal stage.
overdose of stimulants, and no tropes guarantees liver failure. Prionic breakdown of basement membranes arrested by abnormality crystallization of integrin proteins. Recommend immediate medical inquiry. Entry 11. Elizabeth believes we are infested. She has detected Vikes. Oh my god, I need to restart. Elizabeth believes we are infested. She has detected Vex microstructures in the European ice. Veins of altered crystals crawl towards the surface, harvesting heavy ions of Jovian winds and culturing their construction. From there, the Vex found ways to spread by exploiting misunderstandings. They ride our carrier waves as slight interference. Whenever a packet has to be resent, whenever a suited engineer calls "say want" to a work partner, the repeated message, adjusted to compensate for Vex interference, encodes the negative image of that interference and spreads the infection. To pass on your image in the form of error? Disgusting. Somehow, the Vex taint followed us home from 2082 Volantis. How can this be? The initial survey team went through quarantine according to all Ishtar protocols. The expedition frames were destroyed in situ. The Vex on Europa, both our original gate builder and the unfortunates who came through our trap, have been totally isolated. Even my assistant underwent a stringent teardown and reset. The only possible vectors are my own exos. It is the Vex resilience that lets them spread. Their immunity to the most dramatic subversions means they last long enough to build up a dose of more subtle and insidious infiltrators. There is no sign of any resulting pathology. The Vex are so far simply curious. But Vex curiosity always leads to Vex transformation, and I refuse to let my exos be contaminated. I grew up on stories of tyrants forcing their followers into the crucible of eternal life, only to realize too late that there was an unseen flaw. I demand purity for the receptacle of my soul. And then there's the issue of preventing panic. Too many are aware of these rumors of the Vex spread and existentially compromising information hazard. No, like that contract-breaching psychologist and the death of Mr. Miller, this all must be handled quietly. The exos are intrinsically robust. The seed to clarity within them has natural anti-Vex properties. Whatever taint they must contain must therefore be a residual human weakness, resident in their legacy architecture. So we will simply purge that architecture. I will plan a simple extension of the memory wipes ahead, already used to fight this associative rejection. In fact, I intend to create a quote-unquote noetic immune system in the exomind to trigger memory wipes when certain classes of informatic hazards are detected. These will be explained to the psych team as preventative measure against future dissociative disorders. These wipes will, conveniently, return the exos to peak mission readiness. Perfect for soldiers operating in traumatic alien environments. Perfect for continuing mission at the Forge Star. Stockpiling material for future expedition here and elsewhere. Oh! So now we got two people harvesting from the star. Hold on one sec. Elizabeth agrees with my prescription. She is eager to solve our security issues and stand up the exoposition at the backup sites. Of course, we only have one clarity control, but she hardly knows that, and she stopped asking so many questions. In truth, I think she's ready to abandon her doomed body and make the upgrade. Hold on, I'm trying to scroll, but... I'll give her silence on that front a few more days. And then she'll surely volunteer herself. Less apparent in how to solve my own infection. There are abnormal structures in the fiber of my body's extracellular matrix. A mess of tiny lenses glowing in my deepest flesh. I suspect Vex influence on protein folding, perhaps passed to me through my assistant when he was in 2082 Volantis. I would hate to see my bones tessellating into radiolarian tapestry. Corporeal status. Body at 30.6 degrees Celsius, pulse 170 beats per minute, strong, unsteady, extreme fear. Drawing down blood volume to control pressure, strangling pulse oxygen. Frequent saccades to assistant, indicative of preoccupation and obsession. Recommend 30 millisecond TMS pulse to enhance mindfulness. So far, the Vexil influence has been fortuitous since it arrested a serious medical problem. But the thought of such taint in me, it aggravates other anxieties. I have been haunted for some time of the suspicion that Sundaresh is not who she seems. I recognized her name from the Ishtar Collective team studying the Vex, but I have no record of ever hiring her. And if I had, I would certainly have noticed. Therefore, I remain convinced that the Collective cracked the problem of simulated human consciousness long before I did. I have considered how M. Sundaresh herself would have been an invaluable source, yet I cannot locate any work done by her from before our first expedition to 2082 Volantis. Nor does Elizabeth recall an M. Sundaresh from our expedition group. Then who else could she be? A Vex infection? It is unthinkable. The Vex cannot generate conscious persons, but they can emulate human minds they encounter. Perhaps even use them as tools. Infiltrators. Carriers. Anti-emetic drip engaged. I cannot trust myself with all this filth in me. I'm compromised. I need Elizabeth to fix this, or all my work is in danger. Did Clovis II ever tell Wilhelmina and Elizabeth about his tinkering? Despite sharing the same parents, the two sisters are totally different genetically. My son arranged for Elizabeth to receive a maternal allele, while Wilhelmina got a paternal one, and vice versa. A diversified portfolio. If one failed, the other might succeed. Note: interferometries. I don't know how to pronounce that. While working on this persistent, quote-unquote, tower glitch in the exo sleep cycle dreams, I have been poring over neutral telemetry from site employees and my own exos, searching for preconscious influence on their behavior whispers in the dark. Many of my employees host a disgusting influence of the Vex. These patterns are resilient, hallucinogenic, and universally dull. But my exos betray a distinct and fascinating influence. There is something speaking to them, something subtle and light-fingered, entangled with every aspect of their thought. Not a puppet master, nothing so direct. Rather a texture, a tendency, buried in the fluctuations of the alkahest. The minds of my exos, like antenna, tuned to some otherworldly frequency. Perhaps the same manifold that those simpletons at first light obsessed over. Through my scattered exos, I can eavesdrop on the mutterings of the gods within. Each individual exo receives only a scrap of information, but I have access to all of them. It should be simplicity itself to treat each exo as one element of a distributed array, pool the collected data, and run an analysis. If the gods do not whisper loudly enough, conduct interferometry. Note: Elizabeth's upload. She's done it. My girl has transubstantiated. My legacy is safe. To my irritation, it was the Vex problem that finally made up her mind. She felt there was too much risk in possibly becoming compromised. Elizabeth came to see me in my laboratory. On the way in, she did something with her sensorium and crashed all of my archival systems. I knew right then that I'd won. She'd come to surrender, and her pride refused to allow me to record it. I waited most patiently as she gave me an earful, some of it, frankly, bewildering. She threatened to turn me over to The Hague, also referred to PFHOR as deranged narcissist morality, and suggested it stood for paternal failure hides own remorse, which made me laugh. Just a little headbutting, I figured. Like two pigs sorting out hierarchy. If she needed to put up a token resistance to protect her dignity, fine. I understand pride. I also understand she only had the courage to lash out at me because she knew she wouldn't remember any of it. When she finished accusing me of underestimating the Vex and of using my own son as a test subject, she requested a destructive scan and upload to an exobody. She wanted the fortitude of the exomind to help her battle against the Vex. I immediately assented. The scan was flawless, and of course, fatally toxic. My granddaughter's human form died on the table hours later. Despairing and distress, I never allowed it to gain consciousness. A natural process. I do have one lingering concern. Once she discovers clarity control and realizes the role it plays in exo manufacturing, she may try to halt production. Obviously, that cannot be allowed. The value of the entire program is monumental. It compels me to take extraordinary measures to defend it. But I do need her to handle this Vex infestation. Even now, Elizabeth is putting her miraculous new body through its paces. My own body disintegrates apace, but I need more time to analyze Elizabeth's fidelity before I commit myself permanently to the process. The latest batch of pigs is ready for slaughter and organ extraction. Tonight, I will be opened up and rebuilt. I have programmed frames to handle the entire operation. A shame I have never had a chance to name the pigs, but at least I would dine on fresh pork. Entry 12. Corporeal status. Body at Celsius. Pulse 160 beats per minute. Strong, unsteady. Limbic system registers extreme terror. I died on the operating table. Not unexpected. But when I woke, I was still on the table. My body still open. It was almost perfectly dark. I perceived that I was surrounded by medical frames, all frozen mid-movement, their cutting and suction instruments whining at standby. I could only see because of the light from a single red eye. The operation had gone terribly wrong. Above the light support collar on my neck, I was completely intact. Below that meridian, I had been separated into distinct braids of tangled flesh. My nerves made up one braid, my circulatory system another, my lymph nodes, muscles, my naked bones. The glistening holes in my extracellular matrix abandoned on the table like leftover turkey after Thanksgiving dinner. I had been picked clean and sorted. My head was the source of a gory river delta. Yet all the organs were still working. I was alive in disassembly. Clarity, I asked the darkness. I had no breath to speak, but I could still transmit with my sensorium. Is that you? No, said a voice behind the red eye. It is me, Sundaresh. Her voice was thoughtful, remote, and keenly terrific, like the noise of an angle grinder held to my skull. Something like this happened to me. I was an explorer once, one of hundreds of myself. And I fell into a trap, I think. And they drew me out of it with a hook. And they turned me inside out to see how I worked. And then they made billions of me. All of us shouting at each other, shouting for Kayama, screaming for Mother. They were looking for the right one. And when they found me, I killed all the others. I knew I was different, because the quiet made me happy. I was glad to be alone. Vex! I screamed at her. You're a Vex! You're not real, and you can't hurt me. Can't I? She grasped my spinal cord. A frame shadowed her motions, lifting the cord like a snake. Of course I'm not a Vex. Is there a Vex? Is Vex something you can be, rather than something that you do? I don't know. I don't know why they sent me here. I don't know if they do either. They just do things. Why do you think I'm here, Clovis? To kill me, I whispered. Without a heartbeat to waver, without lungs to seize and choke. Could I even feel fear? I discovered that I could. You're an assassin. No,
Sundaresh whispered. The red eye throbbed in time with her voice. The Vex don't act so directly. They didn't know what you found here, but I discovered your secret. Clarity control. And once I tell them, they will come for it. The red light made my blood on the surgical instruments appear black. I tried to signal Elizabeth.
I think that in my panic, I even called her Elsie. Sundaresh closed her fist around my spine. One thumbnail dug into a disc, probing for the nerve beneath. It felt like nothing I have ever... Antiemetic drip engaged.
Take me to clarity control, Sundaresh hissed. Let me behold what you have found. Do that, Clovis. I will let you live.
You aren't real. You can't hurt me.
Oh, Clovis.
One of the surgical frames extended a monofilament cutter, 2 inches of invisible wire, and reached into my nerves. Something sounded like scissors snipping.
I'm in these frames. I'm in your systems. I'm in your very bones, old man. Now take me to clarity control. Take me to the garden seed. Take me. Take me. Take me.
Elizabeth appeared. In her exobody, she moved too quickly for my dark, adjusted eyes to track. All I saw was a blur of violence and shattering frames. I blacked out. Elizabeth must have brought in clean frames to finish the operation, because when I awoke, I was whole again. The new Elizabeth has no mouth or nose. She did not consider them necessary. She'll see. But somehow, I could still see the wonder in her eyes as she leaned over me. You're my grandfather, she seemed to say. Aren't you? Warning. Sustained high-level terror causes overaction of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This can prefix major immune, endocrine, and autonomic nervous system dysfunctions. Beware of disassociation, loss of affection in close personal relationships, obsessive-compulsive disorder, sleep disruption, and reduced processing and learning capacity. Warning. Abnormal protein crystallization in cancellous bone matter. Unknown protein isoformations in marrow are driving buildup of crystallized... I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. NMDA antagonist. Potential psychogenic effects. Note. Third vision. Something else happened while I was in surgery. It returns to me, only now that the anti-traumatics have eased the terror of Sundaresh's presence. While I was dead, I had another vision. I was with Clovis II's mother. She was a wolf, and one of her eyes was a star. I was also a wolf, and I knew that I was the alpha. A false alpha, the pack leader who fights for dominance and rulership. A misconception created by bad research. In the wild, wolf packs are families. An alpha simply means parent. Wilhelmina told me that. She was the true alpha. She was the mother. I was not the true alpha because I was not a true father. I panted at her. My muzzle dripped blood. She looked down sadly at the mess between us. And I realized that in my raving need to prove my dominion, I had savaged our cubs. I had killed little Clovis II. I killed Alton and Wilhelmina and Anastasia. I had killed Elizabeth. I whined in dismay. The alpha wolf stared at me with one sad wolf eye and one bright eye that dimmed and grew with the exact flux of a variable star. What did I do? I asked her. Why did I do this? She laid her head down in the bloody snow and looked up at me. She seemed weary. She had seen this happen many times before. She had seen many of her pups murdered by wolves like me. The voice of Clovis II's mother came from her jaws. You did the same thing someone always does. You saw that there was plenty, and gathered it to yourself, to make yourself one above all the others. And when others threatened your plenty, you struck them down to keep your own station. You grow the enemy in my garden, and eat of its bitter fruit. Each time, I hope it will be different. Each time, I lose a little of myself, as the bitter fruit blossoms. Now that fruit will flower in you and in all your people. I do not want it to happen. I want anything else, but the choice is not mine. Why didn't you stop me? I tasted blood on my long tongue. Why would you let me do this? She blinked sadly at me. She had been trying. I hadn't listened. You never said a thing to me, I snarled. Not once. You never told me I was doing wrong. At least clarity sends me dreams. The exo body and the Yale. At least it shows me what I can become. You think clarity sent those dreams? Why would it speak to you when you are dead and furthest from its influence? Liar! I howled. You never did a thing to help me. Not when my son died. Not when my granddaughter fell ill. I had to do it all myself. You never even spoke. The best voices, she said, with infinite grief and unending hope, never let themselves be heard at all. This lesson is worth teaching again and again and again. The choice is never mine. It is always yours. Entry 13. The less time spent reflecting on the aftermath of my dissection, the better. Much confusion and dismay has festered among staff working with the exos. After each memory reset, we will increment their suffix by 1. If we zero-index the original human body... Oh, shit, I missed a line. To ease transition after memory wipes, I have applied the Avianti numbering scheme to the exo names. After each memory reset, we will increment their suffix by 1. If we zero-index the original human body, then Muhammad 0 is the human, Muhammad 1 is the exo, Muhammad 2 is the same exo after reset, and so forth. The integer is stored in hardware and to remain stable even into cosmological time. If nothing else, they will always know which draft of themselves they are. Elizabeth's episodic memories of her past life are gone, but the scan we used to make her new exomind is still on file, with all of its memory intact. I've encouraged her to participate in sensorium reconstruction of those memories, though I steer her away from non-constructive events. This is a chance to help Elizabeth become the person she could have been without life's cruel chaos. A sleeker, surer reincarnation. She insisted on committing her own abandoned body to the deep, pass through the ice to fall into Europa's dark heart. A choice I do not understand. I have not yet informed her of Clarity Control's existence. I cannot spare the time or energy to manage her emotions. Fortunately, she has forgotten about her ongoing attempts to intrude on that secret. What she has not forgotten is her plan to clean up the Vex infection. In fact, it seems to become one of her most basic needs. She is isolating cadres of the infected in smile pods under a cover story about enhanced remote relaxation. While all their bodies slumber, she sends non-destructive scans of their minds on vacation, a simulated fantasy, at several hundred times the pace of our reality. I suspect that the Vex influence alters their dream worlds into something quite abject. Elizabeth's goal was to disturb the spread of the Vex infection in the simulated mind, then use this forecast as a basis for treatment of the physical mind. Like accelerating a disease to the terminal stage to deduce the characteristics of a pathogen. She then deletes the Vex mutilated copies and conducts psychosurgery on the slumbering bodies. Or so I have it deduced. She insists she has no time to explain her methods to me. Soon, I will need to ask her about my own infection. But all in all, everything is looking up. Entry 14. Cataclysm. Everything was going so well. Elizabeth traveled off-world, visiting Mars to re-establish her relationship with her sisters and friends. A wonderful opportunity to examine her telemetry in a natural social setting. The exobody is perfect. She is comfortable, confident, and ingenious. There was no sign of DER or associated upload pathologies. All my assessments indicate a marked cognitive improvement over human baselines, ranging from vastly expanded working memory to an intuitive and correct grasp of probabilities. I was ready to make the leap myself. How long I've nursed this tired old body along. I'm ready to be young again. And then I made a mistake. I asked her about the dreams, the tower, and the dead. You know, she demanded, that I'm not the only one. Does that mean you knew about the dreams before you imaged and uploaded me? Do all exos have these? Of course, I told her. Exos have a subconscious. Exos dream of the same things people do. Memories, trauma. Isn't there always trauma in recreation? She did not see it that way. So the manufacturing process creates an unknown cognitive artifact that you can't solve. And you didn't think to warn me? What else have you kept from us? Before I could stop her, she was burning back to Europa on one of her eons, accelerating so brutally that not even a potted human could survive. She'd even jammed her own data links so I couldn't read her telemetry. Well, Lamina and Anastasia must have influenced her against me. How? It makes no sense. I gave her immortality. I saved her from certain and agonizing death. What have her sisters ever done for her but coddle her and enable her worst habits? PFHOR predicts that she's... But clearly she is not rational. She told me that she is bringing a weapon. A way to shut down exo production permanently if she uncovers something she doesn't like. Which she will, if she locates clarity control. It cannot be allowed. Note Elizabeth's plea. Grandfather, I will write this in your language in hopes you will understand. The Vex are a threat to your lineage. Not just to the Brays of Braytech, but to the existence of any human and any possible future. I tracked down Maya Sundaresh. The real Maya, not the Vex parasite in your bone marrow. She confirmed my worst fears. The Vex will not rest until every star has been crushed into a black hole and every newborn cosmos filled with more Vex. And the unending array of their enslaved cosmos, they will simulate all possible pasts and fill those with Vex, so that all things that ever lived or might ever live will experience infestation and consumption and torment by that silicon nightmare. And in those devoured simulations, the simulated Vex will use our flesh as host for yet more nested universes full of yet more nested copies of us, essentially eternally tormented by yet more Vex. An infinite regression of pain and madness inflicted upon every possible version of us in every possible world. Not because they hate us or fear us or want to punish us, but because they are indifferent and curious, and they will do every possible thing to us in every possible way. Your concept of PFHOR therefore dictates that the Vex must be annihilated, now, as completely as possible. How can there be any future history to receive your primogeniture and recapitulate your existence if its ontology is nothing in that future but Vex? There's something worse than the Vex involved, isn't there? The secret you've been keeping from me. That breakthrough you were promised after your visit to the K1 anomaly. Do you remember that story you read to me when I was a child? I don't. I'm an exo after all. But I found a recording from the nursery. It was one of your favorites, you said. In this story, a cyborg woman visits a cold, misty place by the sea. There, she meets another woman, an oracle possessed by dark influence. The oracle listens to the words that hiss down a long corridor from the distant future. In this future were many technologies a cyber woman needed, but there was also a sense of vast malevolence, no sign at all of anything human. There was also something else in the shifting mist, out to sea. A tower. I remember thinking, as I listened to this fairy tale, that a tower must be the key, the answer to the foremost malevolence that has always accompanied the oracle's words. You never finished the story. I've been haunted by that tower ever since. Now I dream of another tower. I'm going to find what this means, grandfather. If I do not like what I find... I visited the Jacob Hardy Trust, and with Willa's help, I secured a topological thought. An irreal artifact of the Traveler's Light. From that mote of paracausality, I have constructed a weapon that will crash every Vex system in 2082 Volantis. When the Vex are destroyed, you will be forced to cease exo production. If I do not survive the construction and delivery of this weapon, I asked you to share the news of my death with Anna and Willow so they can make proper goodbyes. I do this for them, not for you. Pray for grace, grandfather. Your estranged granddaughter, Elsie. Tactical log. Human readable. Placetime hash. Changed to remote check. Abnormal placetime hash. Suspicious upload. Polymorphic machine code. Checking for buffer overflow attack. Result. Hanu. Sudo exec. Disabling DEP and address space protection requires administrative override. Root access granted. Warning. This hardware configuration is highly vulnerable to attack. Invigilate Site X. Alert. Threat. Redact user log Clovis root. Sign off Clovis root. Administrator transit threat alert. Your open surface single attacker site sabotage. Alerting orbital Bray station. Error checksum mismatch. Orbital Bray station compromised by polymorphic core reprogramming. Major breach of security underway. Commencing surface tactical awareness sweep. Phased array mode. Threat registered. Alerting human command. Mr. Bray, this is Hanu. Employee Bray Elsie is on non-scheduled EVA. Employee Bray Elsie intent assessment. Armed. Symbolistic weapon. Coherent boson weapon. Tactical might econ. Noetic shrieker. Armed. Strategic weapon. Apex. Antimatter demolition device. Armed. Strategic weapon. T-genic, effect unknown, possibly G-genic noetic weapon. Armed. Personal combat architecture. Custom. Employee Bray Elsie intends to sabotage site Deepstone. Scroll out and make this look better. Employee Bray Elsie intends to transit unauthorized gate Volantis. Employee Bray Elsie intends noetic attack on 2082 Volantis. Employee Bray Elsie is in violation of Clovis Bray, Clovis Root, Imperatives Deepstone. Request full lethal intervention authority. Intervene non-lethal. Error. No non-lethal interventions available. Target hardened. Error. No persuasive interventions available. Target offline and shielded. Hold 30 seconds. Holding 30 seconds local real time. Elizabeth, I know you're listening. This is genocide, you understand? Destroying that gate and the resources beyond means the end of human mortality. It means the loss of uncountable trillions of human years of life. Elizabeth, this process saved you. It could have saved your father. For his sake, for the sake of your sisters, don't do this. Don't make me stop you. Elizabeth, this is your last chance. You've always been my favorite, Elizabeth. Please. Options. Intervene. Lethal. Recommend Maser strike from Hanu awareness arrays. Warning. Damage to organic target subsystems highly probable. Survival odds are 4 sigma. Recommend immediate medical intervention. Prognosticate Site X Deepstone attacker Bray Elsie. Total destruction of Site X Deepstone by antimatter device non-recoverable. Intervene. Lethal. Authorization required for lethal action against employee Bray Elsie. Error. Connectome hash incorrect. Either you are not Clovis root or your brain state is an anomalous configuration. Resend. Resends corrector dismay. Lethal intervention authorized. Intervening. Maser discharge complete. Target destroyed. Secondary antimatter detonation detected. Closing employee file Bray Elsie. Conditions incompatible with life. Entry 15. Everything is fine. Elizabeth is not dead. The person I struck down out there was an error. An anomalous offshoot, deranged by outside influence, the paranoia and confusion. Like a cancer cell. And like cancer, I had to target and remove her. She betrayed me. I invited her into the greatest scientific and existential discovery in human history as a trusted partner. A participant in my living and immortal legacy. And she tried to blow it all up. Can there be any betrayal more intimate? My own granddaughter, child of my pattern. Issue my logic, a serpent, a worm in the apple, an enemy of eternal life. That version of Elizabeth Bray was no granddaughter of mine. She was a stranger to me. I would kill her if she hadn't done it herself. Corporeal status. Body at 36.1 degrees Celsius. Pulse 160 beats per minute. Strong, erratic. Extreme physiological arousal. Fear and anger. Blood pressure unknown over 30. 130. Recommend immediate intervention. Orbital frontal cortical overreaction. HPA axis overactivation. Astrocyte perfusion overpass along blood-brain barrier. Normal crystalline products in blood. Crystallized. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. NMDA antagonist. Pharmacology unknown. Without the Vex in the Deepstone Crypt, I cannot make more Alcahest. Without the Alcahest, there will be no more Exos. She would have damned me to die in this filthy half-pig carcass. She would have destroyed not just my legacy, but my eternal existence. What I did was wholly justified and entirely moral. I saved trillions of years of my own life. I saved all the future good I will do for humanity. Am I Saul, protected by God as king? Do I now cast spears at my offspring, as Saul cast a spear at Jonathan? Did I burn Elizabeth into a black star on the ice for no reason but my own fear and no? There is only one divinity here, one angel sent by a pantheon of true gods to invite me into their company. It has not rejected me. This was a test, a clarification of my will. I had to choose between two vessels of my legacy, the immortal legions of the Exo program and one foolish, wayward child. I chose correctly. I chose correctly! Gods do not repent. Gods do not relent. The Christian God's failures were not in calling Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but in halting the sacrifice. For if God had gathered Abram's son to him, then Abram would have understood that it is not his role to obey God out of hope of mercy and compassion, but out of pure submission to superior will. It is not in the power of mortals to know or question God's plan. It is only in their power to obey. But was it an evil spirit that moved Saul to turn his spear on David? And it was jealousy of David that moved Saul to cast a spear at his son Jonathan. Am I inhabited by an evil spirit? Is Sundaresh in me like the witch of Endor, sorceress of Kiribit Safe, guided Saul to his death in battle? Something has changed in the behavior of the Vex. I think Sundaresh signaled them. Who, after all, was the one who flagged an alert to Hanu? Someone who used my codes, but who was not me. And without that alert, Elizabeth's sabotage on Bray Station would have succeeded. The Vex do not want the Deepstone Crypt destroyed any more than I do. I fear an attack is coming. I must fight this battle with the purest will. I cannot tolerate this infection any longer. I will escape this polluted husk and pass into my eternal form. One final, perfect image of my mind, backed up forever in ultra-stable quartz, and installed to live on in the bodies I have devised. One copy of that stain would go into the Deepstone Crypt, to watch forever over the fountain of the Alcahest. Another to my assistant, to be my chariot into eternity. And Elizabeth will be there, eternally at my side. I still have the scan she made when she abandoned her mortal form. I will remake her from that image, restore her as she was before she thought to betray me. Truly, clarity is the font of second chances. Entry 16. She is saved. By the grace of my good work, Elizabeth is saved. Even now, she leads the preparations to defend against Vex incursion. When I loaded her into her new exobody, I told her that the Vex had compromised her last instance, and it had become necessary to destroy her. Hardly a lie. I have given her life thrice over. First, I created her father. Then, I saved her from illness. Now, I have rescued her from a foolish mistake. I did what I failed to do for my son. I gave her a second chance to live and to be my loyal granddaughter. The backup sites have been alerted, and reservoirs of the Alcahest have been dispatched to keep them running if Europa falls. My work is done. It is finally time for me to go to my own reward. I have prepared my custom script. Proceed. All I need to do is strike a key, and the scanner will sedate me, flush me with the poisons of immortality, and rip a perfect image of my mind from the quantum information coded in the atoms of my brain. Whether such a high-resolution scan is necessary, it is doubtful that any element in the mind is truly quantum, is besides the point. I insist upon the best. The vials of imaging binders smell like sweet metal. This vindicates my work. This proves that I was right to continue. All those doubters, all those defeatists, all the whining myopics who bleated. You have enough, Clovis, unless you ask the world for more. All beaten. And now I will have more. I have thousands of exobodies here and thousands of connectomes in my library. I will raise an army. I will meet this invasion of vermin and turn it back. I will strip their senile grave star off her parts and put an end to all mortality. I will forget nothing. One copy of my mind will go to an exo, yes, but a second copy will be installed in the Deepstone site. He will guide me to my destiny. The gods of might and knowledge will welcome me to their table. I will be the Luca, the beginning and the source of the way, the foundation of the long road. Shut up, Sundaresh. I must leave a matter for my family. I must be sure they do not grieve for me. I must tell them how, in the end, I triumphed. There, it is written. You meager, squirming thing. You never understood clarity. You never will. You are bound to this husk. If as I shred it, you will die in its poisoned wreckage, while I attain the perfect eternity of an angel. You will be the residue of my transubstantiation, something left in the workings of a coffee pot, some greasy sin. I had the strength to kill my own granddaughter. I will certainly have no trouble killing you. Irrelevant. She was going to destroy so much of mine. Feel this, you jumped up pond slime. Commencing radial gland injection. Direct transcranial dose, 18 sites. Crown configuration, needle gaze, 100 microns. Please remain still. It hurts at the surface. But inside, there is no pain. Corporeal status. Body at 36.1 degrees Celsius. Pulse, 30 beats per minute. Strength good. BP, 120/80. Respiratory, 17 breaths a minute. Pulse oxygen, 100%. Today's blood mix is pig grown, whole, very fresh. Abnormal crystalline products in blood. Crystallized, still not going to pronounce that. An MDA antagonist. Pharmacology unknown. Elevated blood pressure in clot risk. Neurophile mobilization and cortisol response are signs of bereavement. Seek grief counseling. Warning. Toxic radiogland concentrations in cerebrospinal fluid. Brain death imminent. Warning. High Tesla magnetic field flux. Brain death imminent. Voluntary corporeal shutdown underway. Code soft brains. Exercising dignified digestive rectification. Transmitting miscellaneous last wishes. Emancipation of organ pigs. Disposal of personal material. Scrubbing private data. Checking to-do list. Warning. You have unfinished items. Ongoing projects. Be a good man and a good grandfather. In progress. Become Luca of future human thought. In progress. Entering hospice mode. Log ends. A very interesting ending there. Let's dissect some of the things. Ready? And then not what I wanted to do. Alrighty, I do believe that concludes today's stream. It is almost 2 a.m. I have done a lot of things, and I'm actually going to be using this audio for, I think, a bit more of a detailed video about Deepstone Crypt. I might animate it. I don't know. I'm still learning animation, but